My name is Valeria Santana. I am 28 years old. The night my mother threw my entire life onto the driveway, I still had plaster dust on my jacket from a renovation site across town. I had just finished a 14-hour day adjusting lighting plans for a restored 1920s theater, and all I wanted was to shower, answer 2 emails, and go to bed. Instead, I turned into my parents' cul-de-sac and saw my clothes, my sketchbooks, my laptop stand, my winter coats, my framed degrees, and half my childhood scattered across the concrete like the ugliest garage sale in the world. My father stood by the garage with a megaphone, as if he were hosting a fair. "Attention, everyone," he shouted. "We're finally kicking out our freeloading 28-year-old daughter." My mother was kneeling beside my suitcases, dragging a paintbrush soaked in red paint across the fabric, scrawling thick letters. "Pathetic." My younger sister laughed as she taped cardboard signs onto folding chairs at the edge of the driveway. "Free junk from a useless leech." The neighbors slowed down. Someone across the street lifted a phone and started recording. Then my mother raised the megaphone and shouted the line she wanted the entire block to remember. "She owes us $16,000. She hasn't contributed a single cent in 3 years." I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just stood there long enough to understand that this was planned, rehearsed, and designed to destroy me in public. So I picked up what hadn't been destroyed, loaded my car in silence, and when I finally looked at them, I said, "This isn't over. You're going to regret tonight." They laughed so hard my mother had to wipe tears from her face. "With what?" she yelled. "What could you possibly do, you failure?" Before I tell you what happened 3 weeks later, and why my phone started blowing up so much that I had to toss it face down into a sink, answer me this. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching me from? I want to see how far this story reaches. I spent that first night in my car, box with my grandmother's ring empty. That missing ring hit me harder than the megaphone. By dawn, I was in a motel on Independencia Avenue, my clothes piled on a chair and a sharp headache pounding behind my eyes. That's when I finally saw the video my sister had posted. She had live-streamed it, not in secret but proudly. There she was filming my belongings like a reporter at a disaster scene, zooming in while my mother shouted about the debt, and my father called me lazy, spoiled, and useless. It already had thousands of views, because people love a public stoning when it's dressed up as tough love. That morning the names stopped being Mom, Dad, and my sister in my head, and became what they really were. Daniela Santana, Gabriel Santana, and Brenda Santana. 3 people who knew exactly which wounds to open because they had spent 28 years studying where I bruised most easily. When you spend your days calculating light angles, fixture loads, and restoration budgets, you learn to keep every receipt. By noon, I had rented a storage unit, leased a small furnished studio on a month-to-month contract, and called the one person I trusted who wouldn't tell me to calm down. Renata Correa had been my best friend since community college, long before I became an architectural lighting designer, and long before she became a local investigative producer for a regional news channel. She didn't ask if I had somehow provoked it. She watched the video once, stayed silent for 5 seconds, and said, "Valeria, save everything. Posts, messages, bank transfers, every voicemail. Your family didn't just humiliate you, They built a case file. She showed up with cold coffee, packing tape, and the first sentence that made me feel human again. "You're not crazy and you're not the villain in their version." Then she added the part that changed everything. "Also, Brenda's live stream captured more than they think. Your mother admitted the exact amount on camera. If that number is false, we can prove it. And if it isn't, they may have to explain where your money actually went." That was the first moment the night stopped feeling like an ending and started feeling like evidence. 2 days later, Renata took me to her older brother's office, Nicholas Correa, a civil lawyer with a voice so calm it makes people on the verge of fainting sit down before they fall. His walls were lined with framed degrees and an ugly lamp that flickered every few minutes, something I noticed immediately because bad lighting has always bothered me more than it should. Nicholas watched the live stream, read the first batch of screenshots, and then asked for my bank statements, transfer records, Venmo notes, and email history with my parents. I expected him to give me a dramatic speech about justice. Instead, he leaned back, clasped his hands, and said something much colder. 2 years ago, I had a client whose family publicly defamed him. He said he wanted a revenge fantasy. What he got was 6 months of legal bills and no satisfaction, because he had no documentation. You do. That's the difference between pain and leverage. Then he started laying out facts I hadn't wanted to see. Daniela had repeatedly sent me text messages marked urgent. Tax payment, insurance notice, mortgage shortfall. Keep this between us. Don't worry your father. Gabriel had emailed me scanned invoices asking me to pay vendors directly because his account was temporarily blocked. I had treated those messages as family duty. Nicholas treated them as a financial record. By the end of that first meeting, he pointed out 3 things that made my stomach drop. First, the $16,000 Daniela shouted through the megaphone almost exactly matched what I had paid into the house over the past 36 months. Second, several municipal permit notifications for renovations on my parents' property had been sent to my email, not theirs. And 2 forms appeared to carry my electronic signature on projects I had never authorized. Third, the homeowner's insurance policy listed me as a co-applicant in an updated declaration filed 8 months earlier. I never signed it. I never gave consent. Nicholas slid the copies across the desk and said, "Valeria, this is no longer just emotional abuse. This could involve fraud, document falsification, and defamation. But I need you to understand something before we continue." I thought he was going to say it would get ugly. Instead, he said, "If I send letters, if we request records, if we contact the bank, your family could lose access to money, credit, and possibly even that house. Once this starts, there's no going back to pretending it was just a family dispute. Are you ready for that?" I should have taken more time to answer. They were still my family. Daniela used to pack my lunches with little notes. Gabriel taught me how to change a tire. Brenda used to crawl into my bed during storms. But families don't have a lifetime license to crush you. Families don't have the right to paint your suitcases red and call it love. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." Nicholas nodded once and began dictating a preservation letter to his assistant. "Preserve all communications, do not delete posts, cease and desist false statements, provide an accounting of funds received from Valeria Santana over the past 3 years. It was the most terrifying music I had ever heard. That night I sat on the floor of my new studio, eating takeout noodles straight from the carton, and staring at a pile of receipts scattered around me like cards in a rigged game. And for the first time, the question wasn't how I could survive what my family had done. The question was how much of my life they had built on the assumption that I would never defend myself. My parents didn't respond to Nicholas's first letter with fear. They responded with arrogance. Daniela posted a long rant on Facebook about children who use therapy buzzwords to justify their selfishness. Gabriel commented underneath with a Bible verse about honoring your father and mother. Brenda reposted clips of the driveway livestream with laughing emojis and the caption, "When parasites finally face consequences." They believed that the more noise they made, the more truth they created. What they didn't know was that Nicholas had already requested the bank records of the transfers I had made, and that Renata had started asking quiet questions through local contacts, because Daniela sat on the board of a neighborhood art fundraiser that depended heavily on family-friendly publicity. A week after the driveway incident, Daniela showed up at that fundraiser in a navy blue sheath dress and a martyr's smile, ready to receive praise for her resilience and motherhood. I went too, not because I wanted to cause a scene, but because I wanted witnesses. The event was held in the lobby of a restored train station hotel downtown. Brass railings, chandeliers, and wealthy donors pretending not to hear the gossip. I arrived in black trousers, a cream blouse, and the jacket Daniela once said made me look too ambitious to be likable. Nicholas came with me, not as a movie-style enforcer, but as a quiet reminder that facts had entered the room. Daniela saw me first. Her smile slipped, but she recovered so quickly it almost impressed me. "Valeria," she said loudly, grabbing a donor's arm before I could respond. "My daughter is going through a difficult phase, but we are praying for her healing." Gabriel moved toward us with Brenda 2 steps behind, already recording on her phone, because apparently the whole family had confused humiliation with a hobby. I let Daniela speak. I let Gabriel say I was unstable. I let Brenda mutter that everyone there should know I had left them ruined. Then, when enough people had gathered without pretending not to listen, I asked one question. "Daniela, do you want to repeat the part where you said I owe you $16,000? She lifted her chin. "Absolutely." I pulled out my phone, connected it to the portable speaker Nicholas had handed me outside, and played the clip of the driveway where she shouted the amount through the megaphone. Then I held up printed transfers, each one labeled with dates, amounts, and purposes. Property taxes, furnace repair, school payment, insurance, emergency plumbing. I read them one by one without raising my voice even once. "This is $2,300 for municipal taxes. This is $2,200 for the air conditioning repair. This is $800 for Brenda's tuition balance. This is the insurance premium you said would prevent cancellation. This is the roofing contractor I paid directly after you said the bank had frozen your account." The room fell silent in a way I had never heard before. Not empty, stunned. Daniela's color shifted. Gabriel said I was embarrassing them. "No," I said. "What embarrasses you is being told no for the first time." Then Nicholas stepped forward and introduced himself. Not theatrically, but clearly enough that donors, board members, and nearby volunteers understood that the rumors now had paperwork behind them. He didn't threaten anyone. He simply stated that false public claims about debt, contribution, and dependency had been documented and were under review, along with the possible unauthorized use of my name on property and insurance documents. Brenda lowered her phone. Daniela tried to laugh it off, but it sounded like glass cracking. A woman from the art board asked if the live stream was real. Another asked if they had truly thrown my belongings outside. Gabriel started talking too fast, the way guilty men do when they realize there are no shortcuts left to sympathy. I left before the argument turned into a swamp. In the parking lot, my hands shook so badly I dropped my keys twice. Nicholas picked them up, placed them in my palm, and said, "That wasn't revenge. That was correction. Revenge is what happens when institutions start to matter." 3 days later, the fundraiser board suspended Daniela while they reviewed the situation. 2 sponsors pulled out, and my family still didn't understand that the worst part hadn't even begun. The social media war exploded exactly as Nicholas had predicted. Daniela doubled down with the posts claiming I had falsified records and manipulated family generosity into a public attack. Gabriel wrote that I was bitter because I had failed in life and needed someone to blame. Brenda uploaded a tearful video insisting I had always resented the family because I couldn't take adult responsibility. For about 6 hours, it worked. People who barely knew us shared half-formed opinions. Distant relatives appeared out of nowhere to say family matters should stay private. Old church acquaintances posted about grace and rebellion, as if there were medals for using scripture to excuse cruelty. Then Renata aired a segment, not detailing every legal aspect, but with enough verified information to shift the ground beneath my parents' feet. It focused on a broader pattern: the public humiliation of adult children, coercive family financial control, and the dangers of false online narratives when video evidence and payment records tell another story. My face was partially blurred. The driveway footage wasn't. Neither was the megaphone, the signs, or the live stream chat cheering while my belongings were soaked in paint. Public sympathy flipped so sharply it almost gave me whiplash. People didn't need me crying on camera. They just needed to see what Daniela and Gabriel had done with full confidence and zero shame. When the narrative shifted, the consequences began falling like dominoes. The neighborhood art board asked Daniela to resign permanently. The dental clinic where she worked as a receptionist placed her on administrative leave after patients complained about her online conduct. Gabriel's small custom furniture business lost 2 pending contracts when clients emailed asking if the man yelling at his daughter with a megaphone was the same one they wanted in their homes. Brenda's side hustle as a lifestyle influencer for her sorority collapsed almost overnight when brands pulled out and her comments filled with driveway clips. Meanwhile, Nicholas filed a formal demand for retraction, preservation of all digital material, and a full accounting of the funds they claimed I owed. He also sent notices regarding possible identity misrepresentation after we obtained copies of municipal applications that appeared to carry my digital signature. My phone started filling with unknown numbers. Some were journalists seeking statements. Some were relatives who had ignored me for years, but suddenly wanted to hear both sides. Some were strangers calling me brave, and I didn't know how to carry that, because bravery sounds much cleaner than what I actually felt. What I felt was exhaustion, rage, satisfaction, heartbreak. Then came the first real crack in my sister. Brenda sent a message at 1:14 a.m. "I didn't know Mom used your name on the paperwork. I swear." She said you had agreed. "Please call me." I didn't respond. 15 minutes later, another message came in. "If you tell people this is a misunderstanding, all of this stops." That message told me everything I needed to know. They still thought my silence was the lever. They still believed I existed to clean up their messes. So instead of calling Brenda, I sent the screenshot to Nicholas. The next morning, he forwarded a municipal notice confirming an investigation into discrepancies in permit applications related to improvements on my parents' property, the conversion of a detached workshop, electrical upgrades, and a rear expansion that had increased the home's valuation. Improvements made while Gabriel told me the house was barely staying afloat. Improvements filed using a name and email that pointed directly to me. That same afternoon, the lending entity reviewing my parents' pending refinancing suspended the application. Their access to quick money vanished. The house that had served as Daniela's stage and Gabriel's kingdom suddenly became a liability with paperwork attached. That's when the calls began to change tone. They were no longer furious. They were terrified. "Valeria, answer. This has gone too far. The bank is asking questions. Your mother has chest pains. Brenda is falling apart. We can talk this through as a family." Funny how family becomes sacred the moment accountability enters the chat. Exactly 3 weeks after Daniela painted my suitcases and called me useless, I was reviewing lighting mock-ups in my office when my phone started vibrating on the desk like it wanted to escape. One call, then another, then 3 at once. Gabriel, Daniela, Brenda, my Aunt Celia, my cousin Diego, an unknown number from the municipal office. Then an avalanche of text messages so fast I could barely read them. "Call me now, please. They're talking about forgery. The insurance policy was flagged. Why would you do this to us? We need you to confirm you approved everything. Answer your mother. Valeria, this is serious. Valeria, please." My work phone rang too. Then my email lit up. Then the voicemails stacked one after another until the notification counter hit numbers I had only seen when a celebrity dies. 56 calls in less than an hour. It felt like being attacked from 6 directions at once. I took the phone into the break room, turned on the faucet, and left it face down next to the sink, because hearing it vibrate against the counter made me feel like I was trapped inside a hive. Nicholas told me not to respond to anyone until he reviewed the latest documents. When he called from his direct line, his voice was firm in that way lawyers use when something is either very bad or very good depending on which side of the desk you're on. "Valeria," he said, "the insurance company opened a fraud review because your parents tried to reference your status as a co-applicant during an update tied to a claim, and you formally disputed that status. The municipal investigation also confirmed that the IP data on 2 permit applications doesn't match, and the lender is demanding explanations about recent financial transfers compared to the public statements that you were a dependent debtor. Their refinancing is frozen." "So that's why they're panicking," I said. "That's part of it," he replied. "There's more. Daniela's employer terminated her this morning after a conduct review. Gabriel's biggest client paused all work until this is resolved. And Brenda, well, Brenda might be the only one who actually understands how serious this is." An hour later, Brenda proved him right by showing up outside my office building without makeup, with swollen eyes and none of the arrogance she had shown in the driveway. She looked younger than I had seen her in years, less like the family favorite and more like a 23-year-old who had finally realized cruelty stops being funny when it turns back on you. I met her in the lobby because I refused to let my chaos enter the workplace I had fought so hard to build. "I'm not here for Mom," she said before I could speak. "I'm here because Dad keeps saying you can fix this if you just confirm you approved the insurance and the permits." "Did you?" I asked. "No," her face crumpled. Then Mom lied to all of us." "Brenda," I said quietly, "Mom didn't just lie. She used me. And you filmed it while she did." That landed. She dropped onto the lobby bench and covered her mouth. Through tears, the pieces started coming out. Daniela had been juggling bills for years, hiding notices from Gabriel until they became emergencies. Gabriel, desperate to keep appearances, approved questionable shortcuts whenever bank forms or contractor deadlines got too close. Brenda knew about the live stream and the public humiliation setup, but not about the paperwork in my name. She thought they were kicking me out to teach me responsibility. She had believed her own script. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt a bone-deep exhaustion. This is what toxic families do. They assign roles until everyone forgets they're choosing them. The scapegoat, the heroic mother, the shouting father, the golden child, the peacekeeping relative. Brenda wasn't innocent, but she wasn't the architect. The architect was Daniela. And Daniela finally called from a number I didn't recognize, leaving a voicemail so stripped of pride she almost sounded like a stranger. "Valeria, please. They're talking about charges. The house, we could lose the house. I know you're angry, but this is your family. Please call me before this goes further." I listened once. Then I forwarded it to Nicholas. That afternoon, he proposed one final controlled meeting on neutral ground, with all communication documented. Not for reconciliation. For terms. For the first time in my life, my family wanted something from me badly enough to hear the word no. We met in a conference room at Nicholas's office the next morning. No cafe audience. No fundraiser donors. No neighbors pretending not to look. Just fluorescent lights, a notepad, a box of tissues no one touched, and the kind of silence that forces people to face the version of themselves they've been avoiding. Daniela looked 10 years older than she had in the driveway. Gabriel's shoulders had collapsed inward, as if anger had been the only thing holding his spine up. Brenda sat at the far end of the table, wringing her hands and looking at me like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. Nicholas began by setting the rules. One person speaks at a time, no shouting, no rewriting documented facts, and no direct contact with me outside approved channels unless I chose otherwise. Daniela broke first. She cried before 5 minutes had passed. Not graceful tears. Not manipulative sobs. Loud, breaking sobs. The kind that come from watching the ground collapse beneath a life you thought appearances could always save. "I was overwhelmed," she said. "I was trying to hold everything together. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I looked at her and felt something colder than anger. Clarity. You bought red paint, I said. You got a megaphone. You made signs. Brenda filmed it. Dad announced it to the neighborhood. That's not going too far. That was the plan. Gabriel tried to interrupt with a speech about stress, pride, and financial pressure, but Nicholas stopped him and slid the disputed forms across the table. Before this becomes emotional again, he said, we need to address the practical matter. Valeria did not authorize the use of her signature or status on these documents. She did not consent to being listed as a co-applicant on the updated insurance declaration. She does not owe the $16,000 that has been repeatedly claimed in public and online. In fact, the available records show the opposite. Daniela whispered, we'll pay it back. Nicholas answered for me, repayment is a condition, not the only one. Then it was my turn. I had rehearsed something dramatic the night before. But I didn't need drama. I needed precision. This is what happens now, I said. You publish a full written retraction. Not vague. Not spiritualized. Specific. You admit I contributed financially to the house. You admit I was publicly humiliated. You remove all posts, videos, and comments attacking me. Brenda permanently takes down the live stream and posts her own apology. Dad sends written notice to any clients he misled if my name was mentioned. Mom, you repay every documented dollar on a schedule approved by Nicholas. You do not contact my workplace. You do not show up at my home. You do not send relatives to pressure me. If any of that happens, Nicholas proceeds without negotiation. Daniela looked at me like she had never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe I had never allowed myself to be this visible. Brenda started crying quietly. I'll apologize, she said. I will. I was horrible to you. That hurt more than I expected. Because for a second, I saw the little girl who used to bring me popsicles on the porch in summer. You were, I said. And I'm not ready to make it easy for you. Gabriel asked if I was really willing to let the family fall apart over a misunderstanding. I almost laughed. No, I said. The family fell apart the night you turned throwing me out into a show. I'm just refusing to stay buried under it. There's a moment when controlling people realize guilt no longer works. You can physically see the strategy die in their eyes. Daniela reached that moment first. She stopped pleading. Stopped reframing. Stopped calling me dramatic. She just looked tired. Ashamed. Smaller than the woman with the megaphone. What happens if we do all that? She asked. What happens then? I answered honestly. Then maybe one day I stop flinching when my phone rings. Maybe one day I remember you without hearing a crowd laughing. Maybe one day I decide if there's anything left to rebuild. But it won't happen because you're my family. It will only happen if you become safe. By the end of the meeting, Daniela had agreed to resign from her last community position, issue the retraction, and begin repayment. Gabriel signed an acknowledgement of the false public debt claim and agreed to cease all direct contact. Brenda offered a written apology and, to my surprise, asked for therapist referrals instead of forgiveness. Later, Nicholas told me that was the first genuinely smart thing anyone at that table had done. The public statements went out within 48 hours. Yes, Daniela was dragged online. But more importantly, the narrative changed. Gabriel's silence became the only apology he could manage. Brenda's audience watched her admit she helped humiliate her own sister for approval and attention. Some mocked her. Others thanked her for telling the truth. I didn't care which. I cared that the lie was dead. As for the house, they kept it. Barely. After restructuring payments and selling off assets Gabriel once treated like status symbols, they didn't lose everything. They lost the fantasy that they could do anything to me and still call themselves righteous. I moved into a sunny apartment above a bookstore in the south part of the city. I filled it with warm lighting, clean lines, and absolutely nothing that smelled like fear. A month later, I was promoted to lead designer on a theater restoration project I had nearly lost in the middle of that family war. The night we tested the final lighting sequence, I stood alone in the balcony and watched a dark stage come to life under cues I had built myself. Soft amber across the proscenium, cool wash over velvet curtains, gold blooming across plaster that had spent years cracked and ignored. And that's when I realized something. Restoration isn't about pretending damage never happened. It's about refusing to let the damage be the final design. That's what I did. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped volunteering to be destroyed by them. And the lesson cost me more than I wanted. But I learned it anyway. Blood is not above self-respect. Sometimes choosing yourself is the only honest form of love left. Love for your future, for your sanity, for the version of you that still deserves peace. So if your own family has ever made you feel like a burden, like a debt, like a mistake they can drag into the street and label useless, remember this. Walking away is not weakness. Telling the truth is not betrayal. And saving yourself is not selfish. It's survival. If you had been sitting in that conference room, looking at the people who broke you, and finally realized you no longer needed their permission to heal, would you have chosen them? Or would you have chosen yourself? In my opinion, this story is powerful because it shows that the deepest wounds often come from the people closest to us. What made Valeria's response so satisfying wasn't just revenge. It was that she chose truth, self-respect, and accountability over chaos. That's what makes this story feel meaningful instead of just dramatic. Sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing a person can do. If you were in Valeria's position, would you have forgiven your family after the truth came out? Or would you have chosen to cut ties completely?